Most businesses struggle with tracking project profit, knowing where their time is being spent, which projects are making them money, and which projects are costing them a fortune. Now, in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to solve that exact problem using a system called Monday.com. So I'm going to start by showing you how to set up basic profit tracking per project, and then we're going to get into way more complex stuff as the video continues. By the way, if you'd like us to help you set up something like this for your business, check out the links below. Anyway, let's get started. As you can see here, I'm inside of our Monday.com system. Now, in case you're not familiar with how to track projects within Monday.com, there is a separate video I've done. You're more than welcome to give that a watch. This just gives you the basic high-level, low-level setup that we've got working here. Now, to start with, and like I said, I'm going to keep this really simple to start with. How do we track the project revenue, the project cost, and consequently the project profit within Monday.com on a project level? So all we need to do is add 3 columns. So if we press the plus button on the far right-hand side here, the first 2 are going to be numbers columns. So this first numbers column is going to be project revenue. Okay, so we'll click in and write in project revenue. There we go, hit enter, and we'll move this across. What you can do is press the 3 dotted button, go to settings, and then customize the numbers column to select the unit or the numerical value that you're using. Numerical value? The currency, yeah, that's the one that I'm going for. So in this instance for us, it's going to be the pound. And then what I'll do is I will hide the column summary. I'm just going to press not now for that. And then we're going to go ahead and add another one. So it's going to be another numbers column. And in this instance, it's going to be our project cost. Write that in, and again we want to do exactly the same thing. Thank God, I'm really struggling this morning with doing anything, to be honest with you, so hopefully this video will be all right. Settings, hide column summary. So project revenue is, let's say, $100. The project cost is $50, and then all we need to do now is add a really simple formula column within Monday.com to track the project profit. So we again press the plus button. You need, like I said, the formula column. Just search for that. And then if you're unfamiliar with how to write formulas within Monday.com, do not worry. Just click in and just go to the AI assistant and just say, give me the difference between project revenue and project cost. Hit enter, and then hopefully it should work. There you go. So now I've got, I know this is really simple, but if you've not used it before, quite important, or it's difficult to know what to do. And then press set formula, and then just call this or rename this project profit. Okay, hit enter, and then all we do is we would hide, let's say, the column summary. And then, actually, sorry, before you do hide the column summary, just press show again, and then click into this and select our unit. So again, this is going to be in the pound, and then we would hide the column summary. Okay, so you can see here how really simple this is. So if I change this to 500, and then our project cost is going to be, let's say this was the bad one, so 450, you can see our project profit again. If you do choose to show the column summary, you get like a total down the bottom here, which is a sum, or you can set it to an average of all of the different lines. So project 3 example, project 4 example. So if I click into here, I can set this as an average, so I can see on average our project revenue, our project cost, and our project profit. So if I change this to 1,000 as an example, you can see how our averages change. It's entirely up to you if you want to use it. But that's, I know, super simple. Obviously, we are just getting started, but hopefully that gives you kind of like a basic idea of how to manage project cost, project profit, project revenue within Monday.com. So the next level of complexity that we're going to move on to is actually managing the same thing, but on a task level as opposed to a project level. So again, if you're not familiar, you would add tasks. Every single task would be associated with the project. This is called a high level, low level board setup. Now, if we wanted to manage our project cost, or quite typically you've got a task cost, then we can do. So there are 2 ways we can manage this. Either we have just a task cost, so let's say one task costs £50, and that's absolutely fine, or we've got time related we've got a time resource that's associated with the task. It gets submitted, associated with the task. Each time has a different cost per person, and that's associated with the project. We're going to come on to that later. But to start with, let's just assume that one task has a cost of, let's say, £20. So to complete this task, it's cost us £20. Not time, literally just hard cost, okay? So we would go ahead and we go and add a new column. And in this instance, it's going to be a numbers column. And we click onto it, and then we'll drag it across, and then I'm just going to call this task cost. Again, same again, we're clicking in 3 dotted buttons, settings, customize, yada yada yada, pound sign, and then I'm going to hide the column summary in this particular instance. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say that example task number 3 has cost us £300 to complete, okay, and number 2 has cost £50, and task let's say for this one, this is associated project example number 3, not number 4. This has cost us £1,000 to complete. Okay, so that's quite self-explanatory. Again, what we would then do is we'd go to the projects board, and as opposed to managing the cost here, because the cost is now being managed on the task level, what we would do is add a mirror column. So press plus, search for a mirror column, click into that, and then we just want to connect our tasks, which is the connection column that already exists. Again, you do need the base setup for this in the separate video. And then we're going to mirror over our task cost, okay? And we'll just do a sum, and then we'll move this across, and oh, what's going on here? Monday. There we go. And we can delete this task cost. So we'll just delete this one. And then we'll rename this task cost. Hit enter, and then we just want to rejig our automation. So again, I'm just going to give it actually exactly the same instruction, or just copy and paste this and just change this to task cost, but that is essentially project cost, so it's the same thing. So I just press insert cost, set formula, and you can see here we're managing project revenue on the project level, which makes sense, but then we've got our costs associated, and our costs actually derive from the tasks, and then they're rolling up to the project level. And you can see here that our project profit for this particular project is £650, and we're actually minus £900 for this particular project. Now, if I go ahead and add obviously more tasks or more values, you can see here that this is associated with project example number 3. So let's say that I set this to I think we're losing money on example number 3, so yeah, we are. So let's say our project revenue is 5,000, so that gives us a bit of a buffer, and then we'll go here and we'll call this 800, and then this one has cost 2,500. Hit enter. You can see now how that rolls up, automatically adjusts, and then gives us our project profit accordingly. Okay, so that's kind of step 2 of all of this. You're not managing your cost on a project level, you're managing it on a task level. Now, taking this a step further, okay, we're going to escalate in matters more. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is we're going to create a new board in this instance. So now we're going to work on the basis of time, which most service-based businesses operate on to an extent, or at least resources. And I'm going to come on to how we can add more resources later on, and then delineate between different resources on a project. But to start with, we just need to manage time. So if I'm working on a project, I need to be able to submit time to that project. That time has an associated cost, and then with that cost it works out what our task cost is or our project cost is, and then gives us our project profit. So we need to go ahead and add a new board, and I'm just going to call this board. So click new board. What should I call it? So I'm going to call this cost submissions, because, and the reason being is because we are going to extrapolate this board further. Otherwise I would just call it time submissions, but it is essentially a cost submission of sorts. So I'll go ahead and press create. Now, the next thing that we're going to want to go ahead and do is just rejig this board somewhat. So redesign it, and we're going to probably redesign it as we go, but I'm just going to call this submissions. Now, every instance someone submits a new time submission associated with a project, this is where it's going to land, okay? So it wouldn't obviously land on the project level, wouldn't land on the tasks level. So we've created a new board, and then we just need some basic information about that time submission. So we call this start date /time, so that's a date column. Then we're going to add another date column, so date column here, and we're going to go end date /time. And then what we want to do is click into both of these, customize the date column, and press show time by default for both of these. Customize show time by default. I'm going to hide the column summary. And then what we want to do is we want to have a formula column that's going to work out the total amount of time in minutes between the start date and time and the end date and time. So I'm going to click into that. And then what's the date today? So go today at, let's say, 10 a.m. So that's a total, or let's do 10:30. Now we've got a start date and time and end date and time. What we want to do is click into our formula column, and we want to work out the difference between the start date and the end date. So click into here, and then we're going to use the AI assistant, and we're going to say, give me the difference between the start date /time and end date /time. Hit enter, and I'm going to see what this gives us back. I'm intrigued. So, okay, interesting. So the only thing we need to add to this is then just put an asterisk and then times 24. So it's then multiplying the output by 24 and then go ahead and press set formula. So you can see here that the start date and end date and time is actually 73.5 hours. Okay, so if I press today here and then at 9 o'clock, it gives me 1.5. So we're working in hours and nothing else. So hours difference. So this is an hours obviously submission. So an hour submission comes in, and then we know the total number of hours that have been submitted against a particular project. We're working hours, not days, obviously, so it's going to be slightly different, like I've discussed. I hope this video is making sense. I'm feeling remarkably slow this morning, so do bear with me. So start date and time, end date and time. We've now got our hours in difference. Now, the next thing that we're going to want to do is work out the cost of that particular hour. So we've got two options here. We can add a formula column, and we can just have a blanket. So let's say 1 hour is equal to £20, for example. So you would just do, and then we would say formula column, you say hours difference times by 20, which is our hourly rate. Okay, so click in, really simple, set formula. So now that's 30. We're going to go ahead on here and set the value to pounds or dollars, whatever you're working in. And now I've got how much this cost me. So I think we're getting there in terms of my brain. So you can see here, this is 2 hours, right? 9 to 11 on the 27th. That's 2 hours difference. And then it's cost £40. Okay, so at total cost. So that's total cost to the business, right? So then what we want to do is go ahead and add a connection column. So we're going to connect this cost submissions board to our projects board, because we're going to start on a project level first, connect it to projects, create a two-way connection. And then what we'll do is we'll just have that as project singular, go over to our projects board, and you can see this has now created a cost submission. Cost submissions, hit enter, and what we want to do is we want to add a mirror column over from the cost submissions board onto our project board, and then we want to mirror across the total cost. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and drag that over here, and then I'll get rid of task cost because that was our previous example. Hit delete, and now what I want to do is just associate. We'll go back to our cost submissions, and I'll associate this submission with this particular project. So I think it's example project number 3, doesn't really matter. And you can see here we've got a total cost, project revenue of 5,000, total cost so far of 40, and then a project profit. We just need to adjust the formula again. So give me difference in between project revenue and total cost. Hit enter. And then I'll just update this. You can see how that works. Set formula. I'm just going to call this project cost, project profit. You can see how this now works really, really easy. I'm just going to hide the column summaries again, because they throw me off a little bit. So we've got project revenue, project cost, project profit. Now, of course, the more submissions that I make associated with a particular project, the more cost associated with that project, thus the less profit, but it's all tracked, but it's tracked on a time submission basis. So a lot of service-based businesses, like I've probably said already, operate on time. So now you can see how much time has gone into it. What I can also do, go back to our projects, press the plus button, and then we can mirror over the total number of hours. Press connect, go to cost submissions is the one that we want, and then we can go hours, and then we can see the total number of hours for this particular project. So this is the number of hours that have been submitted for this project. Obviously we charge £20 an hour, and then that comes off our profit. Now on our cost submissions, obviously what we can do is we can adjust the formula here, and we can say 40 and set formula, and now that gives us obviously per hour it's a rate of 40, and then the hours difference is 2. But we can also take this a step further. So obviously lots of people have varying rates. So a junior person within your organization might be, let's say, £20 an hour. A more senior person, or the most senior person, might be £200, £300, £500 per hour, and we need to factor that in when we're dealing with cost submissions, okay, or at least time submissions. So how would we go about doing that? So if we do want to handle varying rates by person, then what we need to do is actually create a new column. So we're going to press plus button, go to numbers, and then this is going to be our hourly rate. Okay, so we change this to hourly rate. And then what we'll do is I'll just move this across. So we will then set as the pound, and then hide the column summary as standard as per usual. So hide column summary. And then what we want to do is say when status changes, or when item is created, or when person is equal to X, then set the hourly rate as Y. And then we need to do hours difference time the hourly rate equals our total cost. Okay. So as opposed to hours difference times 20, which is just our blanket hourly rate, we need to delete that. And then either just go to AI Assistant again and go hours difference times hourly rate, hit enter, and then watch this, and then insert, and then we've got total cost. Okay, so if I set the hourly rate as 500, obviously 2 hours, that's 1,000. Now the question is, what defines the hourly rate? Few options here. We can go to automate in the top right hand corner, and this is probably going to be the easiest way of doing it if I'm honest with you, and just go create from scratch, and then we go when item created, and then only if, and then we could say person is someone. So in this instance, person is equal to Nick Boardman. Then set number as, let's say, 500. Set number hourly rate to 500 and create automation. So this is saying that when an item is created and the person is equal to Nick Boardman, then the hourly rate will be defined as 500. Obviously that will then, the formula will work to give us our total cost. Now this assumes that either this is coming in from a form because it's when item is created, or you've got an integration. Now, integrations with time submission platforms like Clockify, I'm not going to cover in this video, but that would be my preference or my recommendation. So you track your time within Clockify. Every Clockify submission is associated with a project, potentially even a task. That automatically populates into this here and then connects with the project, gives you your project profit. But as we're not doing that, either you use a form, so you can create a form, add a view, create a form. So when did you start? When did you finish? You don't need to include hourly rate, total cost. So if you're not planning on using a form, nor are you planning on doing the integration, then what you need to do is either say when person column changes to X person, then set the hourly rate as Y, or we could just use a status column. So the other option is the status is equal to Nick Boardman, or status is equal to Alex, or the status is equal to Sally, I don't know, for example. And then we say when status changes to Sally, then set the hourly rate. So we go to automate, top right hand corner, and then go create automation. And then when, let's say, person changes, person assigned, person is assigned, and only if person is, let's say, myself, then set number to, where is it? Set number to, and then it's obviously the hourly rate. It's going to be 500. Just for example's sake, I wish I charged £500 an hour, or maybe we do. There we go. So I change this to myself. That should then trigger. The hourly rate will then be set automatically as 500. And you can see if this was associated with a project, let's say project example number 4, then that would automatically update on our project costs here, like you can see. Well, actually looking at this, you can't see because there are a lot of warning triangles, a triangle of death within monday.com, but looking at this you can see start date and time and end date and time have not actually been populated properly. So if we set this up as, let's say 10, let's say I finished at 12 p.m, so that's 3 hours, 1,500 quid, and then go to projects, you can see how that works, and that's working out accordingly. Now, alternatively, obviously, if you want to use that automation, you can go ahead and when person is assigned and only if person is someone else, so what we could do is just press the 3 dotted button, go to duplicate, and then change this to, I'll untick myself and then select this as Alex and then change this to 100 and then go ahead and press create automation. So you can see now that if I assign Alex to this particular submission or create a new submission, then his hourly rate will automatically populate. Obviously, again, I'll go through this today and then today again, and then just change it to, let's say he only worked 30 minutes and then assign this to example project number 3. You can see here that we've got the total cost, the total number of hours, his hourly rate is defined automatically. We can go to projects and we can see this information really, really easily rolling up to a project level. So hopefully that is beginning to make a bit of sense on how this works. I appreciate this might have been a bit jumbled. Of course, you can continue to add as many submissions as you want. You can change the hourly rate per person using automate in the top right hand corner. You don't necessarily need to use the status column unless you would prefer to use it. Perhaps a great example where you might look to use the status column is if you are working with external people. So you do have a form and you don't want them to be they're not a user in the system, so they can't actually select that as an option. But again, in this instance, we've not got that problem. So the person column will suffice. So now we've got our time submissions associated with our projects. The next thing that we're going to look at doing is actually connecting our cost submissions also with tasks. Now, in this particular instance, we would need to both connect it with the project and the task. The reason being is because there are limitations with mirror columns and the way systems, well, the way Monday.com rolls up. However, being able to submit a cost submission or a timesheet associated with a particular task, obviously that's then really helpful because you can look at the total cost on the project level, but also the task and how much time went into a particular task. You can then reflect back on resource, effort, and capacity, which I've covered in another video, and whether that particular task should have taken as long as it did. And let's say that task was only meant to take half a day and it took 2 days, or if that task was meant to take 2 days and it only took half a day, and you'll be able to very, very easily track that as well. So in order to do that, what we want to do is go ahead and press add column, and we're going to create a connect boards column again. And then in this particular instance, we're going to be associating or connecting with the tasks board. Again, just make sure you go ahead and press create two-way connection and connect the boards. So now we've got the task associated with this time submission. If I head over to our tasks board, we can see the cost submission here. Submission here, hit enter, and then I can drag this across if I need to, or we can reposition it wherever you like. But what I would do is press the 3 dotted button, add a mirror column, and then what we want to do is mirror over what I suspect would be both the time, so not the start date and time, but it would be the hours difference, so total amount of time for this particular task. And then also what I would want to obviously add column to the right, it would be a mirror column. In this instance would be the cost submission is going to be the total cost for this particular task. So that's going to be the total cost here. Total cost. So now if I go back to our cost submissions and I associate, let's say this one here with task example number 1 and this one here with task example number 1, and go over to our projects level, go over to our task level, you can see the total amount of time in hours that have been submitted for this particular task and also the total cost for this particular task. And let's say the effort level associated with this task was a 2, or let's say that's 2 hours, for example, and I can see the total time is 5 hours, then we are way off where we should be. Also, if a more senior person is doing a junior task, then you can see here that that's again way off as well. So worth noting, again, if you're tracking effort being time in hours, and this is in hours, and then if you wanted to track an estimated task cost versus an actual task cost, then you can see the difference as well. So you could go ahead and add another column, and let's call this a numbers column, and let's just say estimated cost, and let's say this is 500, and go to the 3 dotted button, customize, and let's just make this the pounds, and then go hide column summary on here, and then we've got estimated cost, and then we call this total cost or actual cost, and then we could add another formula column if we wanted to, and then we could work out the difference between the estimated and the actual cost for this particular task. So again, get more granularity on the profitability, what's taking up the most time, where our resources is being spent, and how we can limit projects that are costing too much money. So hopefully you followed along. I appreciate this video again might be jumbled. I apologize profusely for that. My brain is not functioning nearly as well as it should be today, but we've essentially gone from managing project profit on a very rudimentary level to now we've got cost submissions associated with both projects and tasks. We can see our task cost, we can see our project cost. It's all working really, really nicely. Again, on the cost submissions, if you are using time, I would strongly recommend integrating with a time submission platform like Clockify. My recommendation, in fact, would be Clockify. And then every single submission would be populated on here automatically. Clockify is just easier to use on the day-to-day as well. And then that obviously would connect to the task, connect to the project automatically, subject to your integration being set up properly, and you would be flying through stuff really, really nicely. And it just makes it a lot easier to track everything that you need to track. So the next thing that we want to take into consideration is alternate resources. So in most businesses, there's not only just time submissions associated with a project or a task, there's also also, let's say, supplies that go into it. You've got just hard costs, so money that needs to be spent for that particular task. You've also got the time submissions as well. And then it's a case of, well, how do we manage that within Monday.com? How do we delineate between the different types of resources? How do we track the resource costs, both on a task level and on a project level, and then get a summary of where our money is being spent for that particular task or for that particular project? We're nearing the end of complexity when it comes to tracking project profit, but I'm going to go ahead and walk you through how we would go ahead and manage the different resources associated with a project. Okay, so we go ahead and press the plus button, and we want to search for a status column, and then I'm going to reposition this over here, and then this is going to be our resource. Okay, and hit enter. So if we click into this and just add a few different labels, so I'll use this one here at the top. I'm not going to use the green one. And then what resource options have we got? So we've got just financial. So it's a financial resource. We've also got, so by financial, I mean that it's just a hard cost. So for example, if I needed to submit something for a client and that submission to, let's say, the government costs money, which it always usually does, then that is just a financial cost that I want to submit against my project. Okay. We've got time, or we could call it people. Let's just call it people. I'll just call it time. And then what else might we have? Let's say supplies. So we've got financial, we've got time, we've got supplies. Again, you can kind of add or remove whatever you think is going to be necessary here. It's entirely up to you. So what we want to do is we want to work out the cost by resource, okay? So hide the column summary. Now, at the moment, our cost submissions board is merely just set up for the resource time. Okay, so on our total cost here, we're going to have to adjust the formula to factor in either time or financial or supplies. So what we're going to want to go ahead and do is just add a new numbers column. So press and just add a new column, call it numbers, and then this is going to be our cost. Obviously, three-dotted button, customize it, make it the pound sign, and this is going to apply for either the financial or the supplies. So if it's financial, I just want to enter in how much does this cost me. So does it cost £100? Or if it's supplies, for example, then we want to go ahead and put £100. Okay. So now supplies and financial, both equal to 100. I'll remove this for time. You wouldn't need to do this for time because obviously it'll be tracked on here. But what we want to do is this cost information needs to actually be added to our total cost. So we want to go to our AI assistant. And what we want to do is we want to say where resource is supplies, just take cost. Where resource is let's say financial, just take cost. And then finally, where resource is time, times the hours difference with the hourly rate. Hit enter. And let's see if this works or not. It should work. I'm hoping it's going to work. There you go. So the formula checks. Yeah, so what this formula is now doing is if the resource is equal to supplies or the resource is equal to financial, then we'll just take the cost. Otherwise, if resource is equal to time, then we take the hours difference times the hourly rate. So you can obviously extrapolate this based on the number of resources that you've got that you'd be submitting for a particular project. But you can see here that for this one, 0.5 times 100. So if I then change the hourly rate to, let's say, 500, you can see how that updates. However, if I change the cost here to 200, you can see how that updates. So this total cost formula is taking into consideration both the hours and hourly rate for the time submissions and just the cost if it's, let's say, a supplies cost or a financial cost. And then it's totaling all of that up into the total cost. If we then go to our projects here, it's working out all of that information from one, or all feeding into one place, which is really, really useful. So if I now go back to our cost submissions, the other thing that we're probably going to want to do is be able to delineate between time cost, supplies cost, and financial cost. So we can do so by going ahead and pressing the plus button and adding formula columns. Now you need a formula column per resource type, but what we're saying, where resource is supplies, show me total cost, hit enter. Okay, so it's only going to show you the so I'm just going to change that to a capital S. There we go. If resource is equal to supplies, then it will show you the total cost. Otherwise, it's going to leave it as blank, okay, and set formula. So you can see here, even though that this is equal to supplies, it's going to show 0. Again, it's going to show 0 in, well, obviously this will work the total cost here. But if it's not, it's going to show nothing, right? And we're going to do exactly the same for, so this is our supplies formula. hit enter. We're going to go ahead and add another formula column, and it's going to be exactly the same principle, but it's going to be our time formula. So what I'll probably do is I'll just copy and paste this and then change this to, I think it was called time. Yeah, it's called time, set formula. And we've got time formula, hit enter. And then what we're going to do is we will add one more formula. And then it's going to be for our financial, isn't it? Yeah. So paste that in and then call this financial and press set formula, financial formula. Now, the reason we're doing this is because we can then mirror across this information from the cost submissions board on both the tasks board and the projects board, and we can see the total breakdown by supplies, time, financial, or whatever other resource that you are managing. So I'm just going to click into here, set all of these as the pound or whatever currency that you are operating in. So pound again, and then I'm going to hide the column summary for all three of these. There we go, hide column summary. So I'm just going to walk through this and add an example submission. So we'll say example submission, hit enter. And then I'm going to set this as myself. Obviously, in this instance, I just set it as financial. I'm going to select the date, start and end date. With start date and time, end date and time. We don't actually need it, but I would add it anyway. You're going to need it for it will freak out the formula column otherwise. So then I'm just going to say the total cost was 500. And you can see here on the financial formula, we've got a value of 500. And again, if I added another one, example number 2, hit enter. And then in this instance, it's going to be time. So I'll assign Alex to this particular submission. He started today, then he finished today, and he finished at 11. You can see here that works that out automatically, and we've got our time formula. And again, I would just associate this with both project and then with a particular task. And then again, I'll do the same for here. So project example number 4, and then I would find the task that's associated with that particular thing. And then you can see here, that's exactly how you go ahead and continue to add cost submissions. So now if I go to, let's say, my project board, and I go ahead and add a new mirror column, and then click into mirror here, we've got our cost submissions. I'm going to connect with our cost submissions, and then I want to see our supplies cost, and then what I could do is go ahead and add another one. So let's say mirror again, and then what I want to do is I want to connect cost submissions, and I am looking for our time cost, and then finally if I go to our mirror again, we could go ahead and connect cost submissions, scroll down, and then financial. So we've got here financial cost, and hit enter. So now I can see my supplies cost, my time cost, and my financial cost associated with this particular project. I also have my total cost here. You can see it all works out perfectly, 100 and 500, 600. Got my project revenue that's already been defined, and then I've got my project profit as well. So you can see how this is so important and so helpful. You can then go to our tasks board or your task board if you've got this set up, and you can set up exactly the same thing as well. So you can mirror over the time, you can mirror over whatever resources that you are choosing to use. Okay, so the next and final thing that I just want to walk you through is tracking budgets. So some people obviously want to have budgets for their projects. Now, budgets don't necessarily mean project revenue. It's actually just the amount they want to spend and what their anticipated or what the goal profit is for that particular project. Now, there are two ways you can do this. Either you can track your budgets on the project level if you want to keep it simple. So if you just want to track the resource budget or budget per resource, so of course we've got supplies, time, and financial. So let's say on here, you wanted to add a new numbers column, and let's say numbers, and I want to say the time budget, and I do not for this project want to spend more than 3,000, let's just say 3,000. And let's say settings, customize pounds. I do not want to spend more than £3,000 on this particular project. So that's our time budget. And then I've got our time cost. So now we can do P&L by resource as well, and you would do the same for supplies, financial, or whatever other resource that you're managing, and then you can manage it all on one board here. Now if you want to take this a step further, and this is not something that I'm really going to cover in this video too much, or I'm not going to do it at all in fact, because it is quite extreme. We have set it up for a few clients, but they're mainly in the construction space where it makes a bit more sense. But they would add a new board and they would call it their budgets board, and then they would budget per phase So within a project, you'd have multiple phases. They would budget per phase and then the type of resources associated with that phase. So in a construction example, you would have trucking, labor, supplies, or materials, and then you might have miscellaneous costs, and I know there are like dumping costs and loads of other costs for construction. So they would put in for their phase, so they would have a connection to a phase would then roll up to a project. It does get quite complicated, but then they would say trucking for this phase is going to be, we want to spend 1,000, and then for materials for this phase is going to be 10,000, for example. And then they could check where their P&L is per resource, per phase, each multiple phases per project. They can then roll up further and further and further. But to start with, we're in a really good place. Again, there's more complexity to everything, and I could go on about with this forever, but hopefully this gives you a really good idea. So if you do want to just track your budgets on a project level and you want to keep it relatively simple, then you've got your time budget, your time cost, and then if we wanted to, we just add another formula column, or just add a formula column, and we would say, give me time budget minus time cost, hit enter, and then we would hopefully get that set formula, and we would be able to see, obviously we just need to define this as the pound, or the whatever resource, and then we've got time P/L, hit enter. You can see here that we've budgeted 3,000. Our cost, unfortunately for us, has been 0 on this project so far. Let's say we want to set this as 2,000 for this particular project. You've got time budget at 2,000, time cost at 1,700, and P&L obviously with 300 profit for where we are for this particular project. Okay, again, this is outside of the project revenue, it's slightly different, but budgets, you know, blah blah blah, budgets. Hopefully that's making sense. Now, one thing to note, if you are doing cost submissions manually, so let's say you're adding time without a form, or yeah, let's say you are doing cost submissions manually, one thing to note is when you select the project, so let's say I'd select project example number 3, it doesn't then only show me the tasks associated with that project. So you can see here we've got a bit of a naming clash, and that's quite common. What I would strongly recommend doing is using a tool called Superforms. So Superforms is an app on the Monday.com app marketplace. You can add it to your system. You do have to unfortunately pay a monthly fee. This is, by the way, if you're not planning on doing any integrations. And then what you can do is select the project. And then when you select the project, it will only show you the tasks associated with that particular project. And also it's just a better way of all of the information coming into the system at once. So you don't need to use when we automate, you don't need to use when person is assigned. You would actually use when an item is created, and only if person is assigned to X person, then set the hourly rate as whatever the value would be. Okay, so just one thing to bear in mind. I know people get really frustrated with, well, I set the project, now why is it showing me all of the different tasks for all of the different projects? I think it's a bit ridiculous as well, but it is what it is. There's not really anything we can do about that. So yeah, use Superforms. You can tell Superforms that when the project is selected, only show the tasks associated with that particular project. And obviously the way you would have it is projects first, then the tasks. That's pretty much everything. We've kind of got a means of tracking project profitability within Monday.com. The next level of this is obviously going into the reporting functions. So I'll just touch on that briefly. If we go ahead and press the plus button in the top left-hand corner, what we can do is go ahead and create a new dashboard. Now, project profits dashboard, call it whatever you like, you can decide what information pulls in. So in this instance, I'm just going to pull in our projects and our tasks. I'm not necessarily going to touch much on our cost submissions, although I do think there's probably some good or useful data in there, like who's submitting the most amount of time, who's generating the most amount of cost for you as a business. And you can see all of that in graphs. But if I go ahead and press done just for our projects and our tasks, project profits here, and then we go ahead and add a widget, let's say a numbers column, and then I can say average profit per project, hit enter, go to the 3 dotted button, go to settings, and then I could click in, unselect, let's say tasks, because we just want our projects. Doesn't really matter about groupings, and we go columns 1 by 1. And then in this particular instance, we want our project profit, we want to customize, we want the average, we want manual, we want 2 decimals, and then we want to select our units. And now I know our average profit per project, which is really, really interesting. We could then go ahead and add another numbers widget here. We could say average cost per task, hit enter, go to the three dotted button, go to settings. We're going to select the board. We want the tasks board, not the projects board. Again, groups don't matter too much. And then we go to numbers one by one, and then we want to go actual cost. And then customize, we want the average, manual. We only want the 2 decimals and then the pound sign. So if I now go over to our tasks board, let's just see if there's any information missing here. So we've got 2100 actual cost. What's the reason that this data isn't pulling through? Settings, average cost per task. We've got actual cost, which is the one we want. All at once, boards, customize, average, boards, groups, numbers, columns, one by one. Weird. So it appears that this isn't working. Now, I have a suspicion I know why. So let me troubleshoot it for you. So Monday does get a bit weird with mirror columns, if I'm being honest. And the other problem is they're constantly changing how they behave. So 1 month a mirror column setup might be working perfectly and reporting works great and you can mirror on different levels, and then they've changed it again. And I find it extremely frustrating. It's a massive bugbear with Monday.com. Now you can see here when I click the actual cost, there's no information pulling across. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to head over to our tasks board and I'm just going to add a formula column. Okay. And we're going to test if this works. I think it probably will. What we essentially want to do is we want to formula column the actual cost onto our formula here. So all we're going to do is just go to the AI assistant and go to total cost, hit enter. And that is going to give me, or I just go to resource and just search total cost, if I can spell correctly, total cost. What is it called? Actual cost. Sorry. My bad. And then go actual cost, hit enter. This will give me the actual cost column. You can see now that we've got it available to us. I can hide the column summary, and this is a typical ridiculous thing, and I'll just call this actual cost formula. So now we can actually report on the data that we have available to us. Okay, so again, if I go actual cost formula, and then if you want time as well, so formula, we would do formula total time. Click in, I'll just search total time. So we're not asking it to perform any formula at all. All we want to do is just get total time formula. So the technical term is casting. So we're casting the information from the mirror column over to a formula column, and then the formula column we can then use in our reporting. So if I go to project profits, average cost per task, 3 dotted button settings, you can now see we would unselect that and select actual cost formula. And that will give us our average cost per task. Go to settings. I'm just going to make sure that this is customized as an average. Yeah, it is indeed. So again, it's ridiculous stuff within Monday.com. That's stuff that probably would frustrate people like crazy. I, fortunately for you, have dealt with this for an unbelievably long time now. So I know how to combat these particular issues. But yeah, just something to be mindful of when you've got multiple mirrors or you're layering mirrors quite substantially. Or the other problem is there's not a lot of layers here, but the problem you do have is there's multiple connections associated with a particular task. That is likely going to be throwing off Monday.com as well. So what I would do on here is I would just restrict the column editing and make it really, really small. So I would just tuck it away somewhere, reposition it back. It's going to let me. Yeah, and then just make it really small. And again, I would do the same here, restrict the column editing. We don't want people to be playing with these formula columns, and they don't really need to be seen, but it is helpful for our reporting purposes. Now, just in case you're wondering, yes, obviously, if you do add another item, then the formula column automatically adjusts, thus the reporting function adjusts as well. So another report that you might want to add, I'm just going to duplicate this. I'm just going to say average hours per task. So average hours per task. That's why we also added the other formula column. So I'll go to settings here, and then as opposed to having actual cost formula, it would be actual time formula. Now the customizer don't actually want a unit, or you could have a right and say hours, 1.17 hours average. You can get rid of the decimal places completely. So if you just want 1 hours, or you can keep it if you want, it's entirely up to you. And you can see here how that would work. So average hours per task. You've got average profit per project. Again, other stuff that we can look at doing here is, let's say, add widget numbers, and we could go 3 dotted button settings. And for this instance, let's just focus on the projects board. We could see, let's say on the numbers column, go one by one. We could say, what have we got here? We've got time budget, time cost, time P&L. So we go average dot time profit per project. So this is giving me the average P&L of profit and loss by the time resource on a project level. So then we go customize, we go £, then we would go average, manual, get rid of one of the decimal places. And you can see here, on average, we are £825 ahead of where we should be for our projects. For the P&L. Now, one thing that is worth mentioning here is you might actually just want to group by completed projects. So you don't want cancelled, active, or new, because they're not going to be accurate reporting. Because if it's a live project, then the active average time P&L per project is going to be skewed because it's live, they've not completed all of the time submissions yet. So if I go to this project here and I just move this into our completed project, hopefully that there is an automation in place that moves this. Apparently not. Let's just move it over. You can see here how that now updates. You've got here, where is it? We've got our time budget of 2,000, our time cost of 1,700, our time P&L of 300. This contains 0, so that's why it's affecting that's why it's changed it to 150. Now, if I go back to our projects and I just what I'll probably do actually is I'll just delete this. Okay, so delete this record because there's no information. It's dummy data. You can see how that then updates. So hopefully that makes sense. Again, additional widgets you could add. You could add some charts if you wanted to. So 3-dotted button. You could go project or profit. Yeah, profit by project. Hit enter, and then our y-axis on our chart type would just have a standard chart type. Our x-axis, sorry, if we just make sure we unselect the tasks board, so x-axis is going to be our project name. So we just select the name. Our y-axis is going to be 1 by 1, and it's going to be our project profit. I can now see, well, that's quite cool, that project profit for project example number 4 is -700, and then it's 4,400 for project example number 3. We can customize this. We can edit the colors if we want to. We can show top and bottom, cumulative data, empty values as well if we want to. And then benchmark lines, what we can do is set benchmark lines. So let's say we want to set our benchmark line for standard or average. I don't know, you call it whatever you want. Or actually, sorry, you would write in the value here. So let's say 1,000 and then just call this average. So on average, we want to make 1,000 or minimum. Why can't I? My brain is useless today. Minimum. Wow. There we go. Got there in the end, and then we'll add that as the red, and then add an optimal or goal of, let's say, 5,000 goal, and then this one can be green. And now we can see, look, our minimum profit per project is 1,000. Our goal is 5,000 profit per project. You can see here that we've massively tanked on this one, and we're actually doing all right on this one here. And then you can go ahead and unselect the groups. So let's say we want to unselect everything bar the completed projects, obviously because you can't really factor in active projects. So I suppose you can do, it's entirely up to you, but the data is not going to be fully accurate. But if I now close this down, you can see I've got one graph. Oh no, we had a shocker. It's -700. Our minimum's 1,000, our goal is 5,000. So I mean, you don't want to be clicking into your project profits board and seeing that you are definitely not in profit. But yes, that is available to you. Now, adding additional widgets, I'm just trying to think what other graphs would be helpful to see. What else could we do? Time, total time, we've got actual costs. Yeah, I mean, you could actually add that one. So let's go time per project. So settings, we could go, firstly, we'll just want to unselect the tasks board. Groups will keep, chart type is going to be standard. Our x-axis is going to be, the name, and then the y-axis, the y-axis, let's just do total number of hours. So unselect this, total number of hours. So you can see here the total number of hours per project. Again, you can customize whatever you like. It's entirely up to you, but I'll just say close this down. Total hours per project. And I can very easily see the number of hours that have been allocated to a particular project. Now, what you could do is if you wanted to add cost submissions here to this project profits board or dashboard, which you can do by adding the connected boards, just select cost submissions, just FYI, unselect, add newly selected boards to all existing widgets. Otherwise, you break all of the widgets you've already created, which is extremely frustrating, but just press done. And now what we can do, add a new widget, go chart, and then we could start feeding in data from our cost submissions onto our charts here. So let's say hours Revenue generated per employee. I don't know. Sure. Go to three dotted button, settings, and then our chart type is going to be, or you could do it as a stacked bar graph if you wanted to do it on a monthly basis, which actually could be quite cool. Revenue generated per month per employee. Go stack bar graph. X-axis is going to be the, well, on boards, by the way, just untick projects and untick tasks. So we're operating on our cost submissions. Our X-axis is going to be the start date / time. Our stack by is going to be actually the person, which is cool. You can expand it if you want to or not. And then our Y-axis, it's entirely up to you. In this particular instance, it's going to be our time formula, I guess. Is it time formula? Financial formula, time formula, total cost, hourly rate, hours difference. No, hours difference. This is, we're operating revenue generated. So that's going to be our total cost. Yes, I guess, if you're thinking about it like that. So you got revenue generated per month per employee. Just go to stack by expanded stack. You can change the colors, of course, if you want to. And then benchmark lines, you can set benchmark lines. So this is the minimum number of revenue that we want an employee to be generating on a monthly basis. Now, by revenue, I mean the total number of hours that they've submitted times by their hourly rate. So people might not consider that revenue unless they're operating on a time bank of some description. Again, hopefully having watched this video, you get the idea of how you could set up time banks. But this is more total cost per month per employee, but not cost. Hard to word this one, but you get the idea. Okay, so you can see in May 2025, Alex has done £200 worth of work, and I have in fact done 2,000. Now, of course, I've probably worked less or maybe similar hours, but Alex's hourly rate is different to mine. What I could also do is obviously work out the number of hours per employee per month, which might actually give me a better representation. So number.hours per employee per month, hit enter. We go to three dotted button again, settings. Chart type is going to be stacked. The boards we want is only the cost submissions here. And then what we're looking for is Y-axis is going to be the start date and time, I suspect. The stack by is going to be person again, so leave it as person. And then the Y-axis on this one is not going to be count, it's going to be the time formula, I think. I might have to double check on the actual board itself, but I think it is time. Let me have a quick look. So if we close this down, cost submissions, it's hours difference, that's the one we're looking for. So if we go back into this, settings, Y-axis, hopefully we have this, hours difference, yeah. So now I can see number of hours per employee per month. Probably what I'd do again is expand and stack it. So now I can see that I've done 3 hours, Alex has done 2.5. You can see why that's different here, because obviously the hourly rates and things like that. But hopefully you are starting to get the idea of how you can continue to build this out and extrapolate your project profits dashboard as much as you want, feed in all of the data that you could possibly ask for. Hopefully this video has been helpful. There's a lot more to cover, obviously. A lot of nuance to this as well. Time banks versus projects versus retainers. How do you handle each of those different scenarios? We often work with businesses that actually do all three. In fact, sometimes we have both retainers active and also projects and also time banks active. So obviously managing those separately can become challenging if you don't know how to do it. If you'd like us to help you, check out any of the links below. We'd be delighted to help. We'll help you set up monday.com, or if you want a more defined means of managing a service-based business, there's another link that you can click called the Scale Engine. And that's kind of that will show you everything that you need to know about all of the different systems to run a really smooth, systematized process for your service-based business. Thank you ever so much for watching. Hopefully this video has been helpful. Apologies for my brain fog, very slow morning. Thank you and goodbye.